everybody, this is Anne on a very, very hot day here. And welcome back to Painting Big. Today, I've got kind of a survey thing for you. I wanted to start working on teaching you our conceptual techniques, what I call conceptual technique. And what those are techniques that have nothing to do with the manual way that you put paint on the model. They more have to do about thinking about how light hits the model, how light travels, how color looks under light. Essentially all the things that are concepts, right? They're not mechanical techniques, they're concepts that you can use to execute a paint job. So it occurred to me that probably I should set this up by doing this introductory video, kind of show you guys the different sorts of topics that I want to cover in this kind of micro series. And then in the following videos, we'll actually be hands-on executing on a model, showing you step by step how I would do something. This is probably going to be a pretty long series because as you see, there's lots of different ways to do this stuff. So let's just get right into that. Alrighty, got my cheat sheet here. Alright, so the different things that come under conceptual techniques for me. Things like non-metallic metal. Non-metallic metal is abbreviated NMM, so if you've ever seen that, that's what it's referring to. And what it is it's using shades of gray or yellow and brown to create the illusion that there's a metallic surface when actually you're just painting it in flat colors. So it can be very simple for small things. It can be very elaborate for larger models that have a lot of room. And it also changes. So painting NMM on a sword held up horizontally like this one is actually one of the most simple things that you can choose to start with on NMM. Whereas doing something on a curved axe blade is going to actually be a little bit more intense, like trying to figure out how to show the light falling like you need it to. They follow the same rules, but as you move on to different types of surfaces like helmets and chest plates and things like that, then you can get into a lot of, oh my gosh, what do I do in this situation? So what I'm going to be trying to do in the NMM videos is I'm going to try to give you kind of the principles that I use when I'm breaking down a project. Okay, how would light act in this circumstance? Second conceptual technique that everyone loves, and these are always ones that people always try to do before they really know what they're doing, and then they go, why didn't it work? Is OSL, object source lighting, other source lighting. However you want to call it, OSL means something that glows. So it can be something like the fireball atop the snake here, snake lady. One I've done recently on my stream that we're still working on is this really cool one of the torchbearer warrior. And he's also got a secondary OSL with these glowing crystals that he's carrying in a pouch at his front. Two different ways to do it in here, and we'll be talking about both of those kind of things on these videos. Kind of a third one, and it's kind of a little bit weird, but I actually include crystals and gemstones under this because it takes some extrapolation of light sourcing to really kind of get the how to paint crystals, especially big ones. Another example of this would be the crystal dragon that I recently completed on my own stream. Although he's got a couple of things that kind of break the rules on him too. But in general, things like that. So I consider gemstones and crystals another one of those techniques. Another one that I don't have a ready example of would be fluid-filled containers. If I can find a good model for that, then maybe we'll cover that too. And finally, if you think that you dislike NMM and you prefer metallics, I want you to think about something. And that is that if you're going to elevate your metallics game, you probably would do well to learn the principles of NMM. Because when I paint metallics, like on this knoll, that sword is painted using the same principles and the same highlight and shadow placement that I would use if I were painting non-metallic metals. So even if you like metallics, by using the highlight and shadow placement to make your metallics look better, even if you hate NMM, you can really elevate your use of metallics that way. Another example of true metallics would be Mr. Grumpy here. His breastplate is probably my favorite thing that I've done in metallics. You can do a lot on a big model like this. But this is shaded metallics, and again, if I were doing this in NMM, I would be using a lot of the same principles and highlight and shadow placement that I'm doing, and in colors, to do the rusty kind of effects and stuff like that. So my point is, again, If you don't like NMM, learn the principles anyway and use them to make jaw-dropping metallics. All right, so now we've got kind of those, this is what I'd like to cover out of the way. So let's actually talk a little bit about what all these things have in common. Pretty much every conceptual technique, here we'll put somebody in frame so that y'all can have eye candy while I talk about this. So pretty much everything we're talking about has something to do with light, right? And technically, by the way, you could include my little water effect here, which is all flat painted. This effect also, has a lot to do with light and how it falls on water and stuff like that. So all of these are going to have to do something to do with light. And there are 4 things that I want you to kind of consider as we move forward into doing various videos about this stuff. So I'll probably reiterate these at the start of every one of these videos because it's going to influence how I execute on the particular thing that we're painting. But I'm going to give those to you now just so you can think about them while I show you how I'm using them on these various models, all right? Okay, so let's start with source. And this is probably the first question that I ask people who come up to me saying, I tried NMM and this is how it turned out. What do you think of it? And almost always there will be kind of a disparity. Like they'll have done the sword one way and the chest plate, breastplate another way. And maybe they've done the rim of the shield a third way. And the helmet is like maybe done a way. And I'll be like, okay, so where's your light coming from? And they'll just kind of look at me and go, huh? Because they didn't think of it that way. They just thought, oh, well, this is light, this is dark, this is this. But if you don't have a idea of the direction your light is coming from, there's almost always going to be a little bit of a flaw in your NMM, unless you're just copying off of a box art. Then you maybe can get away with it. But even then, when you go to do the back side of the model or a side you can't see, if you don't have those rules down, something's going to be amiss, right, when somebody experienced looked at it. So the first thing you need to think about is, where is my light coming from? Now, most of the models that I'm painting, my light's going to be coming from above. In the one on the right, I actually black primed him and sprayed him over the top with white so that you could see the shadow. You can especially see it on the skin transitions here. So I definitely was going to be acting from the my light is coming from above direction. And when you're dealing with wonky surfaces like curved axes or helmets or things like little buttons and things like that, it's important to know exactly where that's coming from. It's going to influence the way you paint those things. Now with OSL, obviously, we're a little bit different, right? Again, we have a light from above on Snack Lady, but it's very close to her, right? It's not a far away, even light like outside light would be. So here, what we've got are very dark shadows that are painted in to show that, right? So how close your light is to the source is also going to influence how you paint this. A light that's up close is going to have very dark cast shadows like this if it's of any intensity at all, which brings us to intensity. How strong is the light? The stronger the light source, the darker the shadows, right? Another thing I should say is that OSL also covers lighting effects as like you deciding that the light is coming from the side of the figure, or you deciding that the light is a certain time of day. For example, and now we'll get to color. Color of the light is the final thing. So we've had source of the light, direction of the light, where it's traveling, what things it's hitting, the intensity of the light, how strong it is, how much does it fade as it moves away from the primary source, and finally the color. The color of the light is, and this is where a lot of beginners to OSL will kind of screw up, the color of the light is always going to influence the surface that it hits. So when you are deciding on colors for the model and you know that you're going to have a lighting effect, you should think about that. Because in the case of Snake Lady, what happens is that her purple cloth totally turns brown underneath this light. We can see that it's purple in the shadows because I wanted a secondary light that was very blue on this model. So the blue light shows the purple like it should. But underneath this light source, purple turns brown. So essentially it's washed out everything here. So I might have been better off doing what I did on this guy and giving her a red cloth instead, right? Because then the red actually turns orangey under the yellow light, but you don't lose the color. You actually can still see the color. The color is still conveyed. So that's the last thing, the last factor. The color of the light is going to influence what it's falling on. Another example of that, actually, since I'm having fun and showing you guys stuff, another example of that is Mr. Mouseling here. The color of the light is, again, torchlight. And you can see that the front of him, his fur is much warmer, much more orange. The greens are more warm. The brown is warm. Then you go to the back of the mouse and everything is blued out. Everything is very cold. Again, I'm using kind of a blue-white reflected light here, as if he's like standing in a corridor that's all kind of blue-gray stone, and the reflected light is coming back very cold. So this model has both OSL and NMM, and they're working together. So you can see the light color in the sword. So again, color of the light source. Intensity, even though this is shiny, so it picks up the light more than the rest of the mouse does, but it's still like more at a distance, and it's not quite as intense as you might think it would be. Direction. Most of the mouse is blocking most of the sword. So the light doesn't actually reach most of the sword. It just picks up the tip. You can see that here because I can see these two things overlap. And again, we'll go more into the rules and the ways that I figure out how to do this stuff as we get to our OSL videos. So there you go, everybody. I hope that that makes some sense to you, those 4 things: source, direction, color, intensity. All right, so hopefully that gives you guys a taste of what is going to be coming up in the coming months of videos. I'm going to start with non-metallic metal. I can't guarantee that I'll go all the way through it before I switch over and do some object source lighting. I know that a lot of you love the glowing objects thing and will want to have a lesson in that probably before I manage to get through every potential NMM example I might want to do. So that'll be fine. We'll just kind of play it by ear, and I hope that you're looking forward to it. If you have any questions and you're watching this on YouTube, I have a Patreon, patreon.com/paintingbig. And I do have a free level on there. And that's probably the best way to get in and ask me questions. I don't often have time for YouTube comments, but I almost always have time if you leave a comment on a Patreon post, and as a free user, you absolutely can. The other thing about being a free member is that you'll get emailed right when I put the post up. And you get to watch the videos early. You don't have to wait for them to get to YouTube. All right. That said, thank you, everybody. I hope that you are having a great summer, even though it is blazing hot here today. Hopefully you're a little cooler than I am. And I will see you at some point in the future with a handy video on non-metallic metal on swords. All right? Thank you very much. And this is Anne signing off.